Imagine two empires built on absolute efficiency. One designed a system that changed global manufacturing forever. The other created a network that moved tons across continents without leaving a trace. Henry Ford revolutionized Detroit with the assembly line. Griselda Blanco dominated Miami with decentralized operational cells. Both solved the same problem: how to make hundreds of people function like a perfect machine. One built a legacy spanning 120 years. The other collapsed in violence. Today we analyze two opposing models of teamwork and a brutal lesson about what makes efficiency truly sustainable. Section 2. Context. TWO worlds, one same challenge. Detroit, 1903. The automotive industry was an artisanal craft reserved for millionaires. Each automobile was built piece by piece, required weeks of manual labor, and cost what an average worker earned in 2 years. Henry Ford observed this landscape with frustration, not from lack of demand, but from a brutal bottleneck. Production was too slow, too expensive, too inefficient. His vision was clear: put an automobile within reach of every family. But to achieve it, he needed to solve a problem no one had faced before: how to coordinate hundreds of workers to produce thousands of identical units without chaos destroying quality. The challenge wasn't technical, it was human. 1970. Miami was becoming the capital of a trade that moved billions of dollars annually. Griselda Blanco arrived from Medellin with ambition as excessive as her context was chaotic. Drug trafficking at that time had no structure. It was a cowboy business: constant betrayals, territorial wars, absolute distrust. Each operation depended on people who could become informants, competitors, or corpses within hours. Blanco faced a problem identical to Ford's, but magnified by illegality. How to create an efficient system when you can't trust anyone, when legal contracts don't exist, when the only guarantee is violence. Two opposite worlds, two incomparable contexts, but one identical technical challenge. Ford had the advantage of legality. He could document processes, train workers, and build permanent infrastructure. But he faced the industrial mentality of his era: artisans who resisted standardization, investors who doubted mass production, a workforce accustomed to working in small workshops. His revolution wasn't just mechanical, it was cultural. He needed to convince hundreds of people to abandon decades of tradition to become pieces of a larger machine. Blanco didn't have that luxury. She operated in the shadows, where documentation was incriminating evidence and trust was a fatal luxury. She couldn't offer contracts or job stability. Her workforce lived under constant threat, from the law, from rivals, from herself. But she needed to coordinate complex operations involving production in Colombia, international transport, distribution in multiple US cities, and money laundering on an industrial scale. All without leaving a trace. All knowing any link could betray her. Ford built his system from scratch, with resources, time, and legality. Blanco had to design hers in the middle of crossfire. Both understood something fundamental: efficiency doesn't emerge from chaos. It requires architecture. It requires each person to know exactly what to do, when to do it, and how their work connects with the rest of the system. The difference was in the foundation. One built on concrete, the other on gunpowder, and that difference would define everything that came after. Section 3. System Architecture. Destigning EF FICNG. 1913. The Highland Park plant in Detroit became the laboratory of a silent revolution. Henry Ford implemented something that would change manufacturing forever: the moving assembly line. The concept was brutal in its simplicity. Instead of workers moving toward the car moved toward the workers. Each person performed a specific task, repetitive, perfectly synchronized. One worker placed the steering wheel. Another tightened the bolts. Another installed the engine. 84 exact steps, executed in perfect sequence. The result was devastating for the competition. What previously took 12.5 hours now required 93 minutes. The cost of the Model T fell from $850 to less than $300. Production exploded from 1,000 monthly units to 10,000. Ford didn't invent the automobile. He invented a way to produce it like bread. His system operated under 4 unbreakable principles: absolute standardization of processes, radical specialization of tasks, elimination of unnecessary movements, and continuous flow without interruptions. Every second counted. Every gesture was calculated. Every worker was a precision piece in a larger mechanism. Transparency was total. Processes were documented, measurable, replicable. Anyone could be trained for any position in days. Knowledge didn't depend on individuals. It was institutionalized in the system itself. 1978. Miami Beach operated under completely different rules. Griselda Blanco designed an architecture based on the opposite, absolute compartmentalization. Her system was a network of operational cells that functioned independently. No one knew the complete operation. Transporters didn't know who the distributors were. Distributors didn't know the routes. Routes changed constantly to avoid detectable patterns. Information flowed vertically, never horizontally. Blanco implemented systematic redundancy. If one route was intercepted, 3 more were operating simultaneously. If an operator fell, another replaced them within hours without the chain stopping. She created communication protocols that were rudimentary but effective for their time. Verbal codes, disposable human messengers, signals that seemed innocent. Her pyramidal structure delegated authority by levels. She made strategic decisions. Trusted lieutenants managed regions. Low-level operators executed without questioning. The numbers were impressive. Her network moved between 1 and 2 tons monthly at its peak. It operated in Miami, New York, Los Angeles, and California simultaneously. It generated estimates of $2 billion annually, all without email, without GPS, without modern technology. Just brutal hierarchy and institutionalized fear. But there was a fundamental difference from Ford. Her efficiency depended on secrecy. Each operator knew barely enough to fulfill their function. Documentation was non-existent. Knowledge died with people. There were no procedure manuals or written protocols. Everything lived in memory and oral tradition. Training was through violent immersion. Either you learned fast or you disappeared. Ford built a transparent machine that anyone could study, improve, and replicate. Blanco built a black box that would collapse with her. Both achieved astonishing efficiency, but only one designed a system that could survive its creator. Section 4. Talent Management. People AASP says. January 5th, 1914. Henry Ford announced something the press called corporate madness. He would double his workers' daily salary to $5. The industrial average was around $2.30. Wall Street considered it financial suicide. Competitors predicted his imminent bankruptcy. Ford understood something his critics ignored. Workers weren't just a cost. They were the backbone of the system. The math was brutal but effective. Before the salary increase, labor turnover at Ford reached 370% annually. Training a worker costs time and money. Losing them meant losing the investment. With the new salary, turnover fell to 16%. Detroit's best workers lined up to enter Ford. Productivity skyrocketed. Errors fell. Production speed increased without sacrificing quality. Ford didn't act out of altruism. He acted out of a cold strategy. Well-paid workers meant loyalty. Loyalty meant accumulated experience. Experience meant compound efficiency. Additionally, he created something revolutionary. His own employees could buy the cars they manufactured. He turned his workforce into his market. Each worker was simultaneously producer and consumer. The system fed itself. But there was a dark side. Ford implemented the sociology department, a division that investigated his employees' private lives. They visited their homes. They evaluated their habits. They judged their morality. To earn the full $5, workers had to demonstrate an orderly life, stable marriage, disciplined savings, abstinence from alcohol. Ford bought productivity but also obedience. Invasive paternalism disguised as social benefit. Still, the result was undeniable. Ford built a loyal army of trained workers who remained with the company for years. He institutionalized knowledge. He created organizational culture. Miami, late 70s, Griselda Blanco faced the opposite problem. She couldn't offer stability. Labor contracts or pensions didn't exist. Her workforce lived on the tightrope between explosive wealth and sudden death. She recruited out of desperate necessity or excessive ambition. Young people without options. Immigrants without papers. People willing to risk everything for quick money. Her compensation model was extreme. She paid fortunes for successful jobs, publicly executed failures. The carrot was enormous. The stick was terminal. She generated temporary loyalty based on fear and greed. But turnover was brutal. Constant arrests, frequent murders, inevitable betrayals. Each lost operator meant volatilized knowledge. Blanco couldn't institutionalize anything. There were no training manuals. Formal mentoring processes didn't exist. You learned by watching. You survived by instinct. Training was violent immersion in real operations. Mistakes were paid with life. There were no second chances or learning curves. Her structure generated short-term efficiency but structural fragility. Each person was replaceable because no one was truly valuable. The organization didn't invest in its people because people were disposable. The result? High operational effectiveness but zero long-term capacity building. Ford built a system where people grew with the company. Blanco built a grinder that consumed people and spit out temporary results. One created a sustainable ecosystem. The other created a cycle of destruction. And that difference would determine which system could scale and which was doomed to collapse under its own weight. Section 5. Scalability and sustainability. The test OF time. 1927. Ford Motor Company reached an unthinkable figure. 15 million Model T units produced. The Highland Park factory had multiplied into plants around the world. Detroit, Manchester, Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo. Ford's system didn't just work. It was replicated. Each plant operated with the same principles: assembly line, standardization, specialization. Procedure manuals traveled between continents. A Michigan engineer could supervise a factory in Argentina because the processes were identical. Ford's revolution transcended the automotive industry. His methodology became the foundation of modern manufacturing. Appliances, electronics, heavy machinery. All industries adopted his principles. In the 50s, Toyota studied Ford's system and evolved it toward lean manufacturing. In the 80s, just-in-time methodology refined his concepts even further. Each generation built upon the foundations Ford established. 120 years later, Ford Motor Company continues operating. It has survived 2 world wars, the Great Depression, oil crises, global recessions. The company has changed leaders dozens of times. Henry Ford died in 1947, but his system survived him for decades because it didn't depend on him. It depended on documented processes, institutionalized knowledge, and transmissible organizational culture. Ford's legacy isn't automobiles. It's proof that efficiency based on solid principles transcends its creators. 1985. Griselda Blanco controlled an empire estimated at $2 billion annually. Her network operated from Medellin to California. She moved tons weekly. She employed hundreds of operators. On paper, it was a successfully scaled system, but the cracks were already evident. Constant arrests dismantled complete cells. Territorial wars with competitors bled resources. Internal betrayals eroded the structure. In 1985, she was arrested. Her empire began crumbling immediately, not from lack of demand, from the lack of a transferable system. The lieutenants fought each other for territory. Routes collapsed without central coordination. Operators fled or were captured. There were no manuals to consult. There were no written protocols to follow. All knowledge lived in heads that were now dead, imprisoned, or hidden. She spent almost 20 years in prison. She was deported to Colombia in 2004. The empire she built no longer existed. Others had taken her place with different methods. Her model wasn't replicated because it wasn't replicable. It was too dependent on her personal leadership, her specific violence, her particular network of contacts. When she fell, everything fell with her. September 3rd, 2012. Griselda Blanco was murdered in Medellin by 2 hitmen on a motorcycle. She died as she lived, violently. Her legacy wasn't institutions. It was corpses, destroyed families, and devastated communities. Zero measurable positive impact. Zero transferable knowledge construction. Zero sustainability. Ford built a system that multiplied wealth for generations. Blanco built an empire that evaporated with her freedom. The difference wasn't talent. Both were operational geniuses. The difference was foundation. One built on principles that could be documented, taught, improved. The other built on violence that could only be imitated until greater violence surpassed it. The test of time is brutal. It reveals which systems have real architecture and which are just sandcastles waiting for the tide. Section 6. Apipplicable liaisons. Knowledge transfer. Two systems, two opposite results, one inevitable question. What can we extract from both models to apply in legitimate operations? Because beyond moral judgment, both solved human coordination problems on a massive scale. And those problems are universal. From Ford, we can extract principles that have withstood more than a century of testing. First, standardization doesn't mean robotization. Ford didn't turn people into machines. He turned chaos into a process. Each worker remained human, but operated within a predictable system. In any business, documenting processes doesn't eliminate creativity. It eliminates unnecessary friction. It allows talent to focus on improving, not constantly improvising. Second, investing in your people is investing in your system. The $5 daily wasn't generous. It was a coldly calculated retention strategy. Reducing turnover means accumulating experience. Accumulating experience means compound efficiency. In modern startups, the cost of replacing talent can reach up to 200% of annual salary. Ford understood this 110 years ago. Third, transparency generates speed. When everyone knows the complete process, decisions accelerate. There are no bottlenecks from lack of information. There's no time lost in redundant explanations. High-performance teams operate with shared context. Ford achieved it with physical manuals. Today, we achieve it with digital documentation, but the principle is identical. Fourth, sustainability surpasses explosiveness. Ford could have exploited workers by paying less. In the short term, he would have maximized profit. But he built for decades, not quarters. Companies that endure understand that sustained growth surpasses unsustainable peaks. From Blanco's model, we can extract lessons by negation, but also some principles applicable in legitimate contexts. Information compartmentalization has real value in sensitive operations. Technology companies use isolated teams for confidential projects, not out of criminal paranoia, but for strategic protection of intellectual property. Operational redundancy is a fundamental principle in systems engineering. If one route fails, another must activate immediately. Amazon, Google, any critical platform operates with multiple backups. Blanco applied this in an illegal context, but the concept is universally valid. Decentralization allows scaling without creating single points of failure. Modern organizations adopt distributed structures where regional teams have operational autonomy under central principles. It's not Blanco's decentralization based on distrust. It's strategic decentralization based on efficiency. But the most important lesson comes from the contrast. Blanco demonstrated that efficiency without legitimacy is doomed. That systems based on fear generate temporary loyalty but structural fragility. That violence can force obedience but never builds real commitment. That secrecy protects operations but prevents institutionalization. Ford demonstrated the opposite. That well-implemented transparency is more powerful than secrecy. That institutional trust surpasses control through fear. That sustainable systems require people to want to participate, not be forced. The question for any entrepreneur is direct. Are you building a Ford system or a Blanco system? Are you documenting processes or accumulating non-transferable knowledge? Are you investing in your people or simply extracting value until they leave? Are you building to transcend yourself or creating something that will collapse when you're gone? Because in the end, true efficiency isn't measured in speed. It's measured in duration. Section 7. Sclossing. Final reflection. Two architects of efficiency. Two models that solved the same problem. How to convert human chaos into a perfect machine. Henry Ford built a system that survived 120 years, transformed entire industries, and democratized access to transportation. Griselda Blanco built an empire that evaporated with her arrest, leaving only violence and destruction as legacy. Both were operational geniuses, but only one built something that transcended their existence. The difference wasn't talent or ambition. It was the foundation. Ford understood that sustainable efficiency requires transparency, documentation, investment in people, and replicable processes. He built on principles that could be taught, improved, and transferred. Each worker was valuable because the system made them valuable. Each process was designed to last longer than him. His legacy isn't automobiles. It's proof that well-designed systems transcend their creators. Blanco demonstrated that efficiency without legitimacy is a sandcastle. That fear generates temporary obedience but never real commitment. That secrecy protects operations but prevents institutionalization. That violence can force short-term results but guarantees long-term collapse. Her empire collapsed because it depended exclusively on her. When she fell, everything fell with her. The lesson is brutal but clear. You can build fast or you can build to last. You can extract immediate value or you can create systems that generate value for decades. You can base your organization on fear or on principles. The choice defines not only your success, but your legacy. In business, as in life, the strategy you choose defines what will remain when you're gone. Ford chose to build institutions. Blanco chose to build a personal empire. One created transferable knowledge. The other created terminal dependency. One multiplied wealth for generations. The other concentrated wealth until its inevitable destruction. The question isn't whether you want efficiency. It's what type of efficiency you're willing to build. If this analysis made you think differently about how you build your business or lead your team, leave me a comment with your reflection. I want to know which Ford principle you'd apply today, or which Blanco mistake you've seen repeated in modern organizations. The most valuable conversation happens in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you want more analysis like this. We compare opposing strategies to extract applicable lessons. Every week, new cases, new contrasts, new lessons. Hit the bell to not miss the next video. We're going to analyze another clash between two extreme business models. And if you made it this far, thanks for your time. See you in the next analysis.